food for thought for everyone is how can we change the mindset for sports to become more as a human right. So everyone should have access to sports and everyone should benefit of the outcomes of physical activity.
Okay, That Tech Showers, welcome to another episode of That Tech Show with me, Chris Adams, and who are you again?
Kylie Minogue.
Are you actually not going to introduce yourself today? All right then. Hi Sam, how are you doing?
I'm good. This week on the show, we have Fransisco Baptista of TeamSportz, who speak to us about being born in the war-torn country of Angola, where he developed the love of grassroots sports. He'll be telling us about how he blended his passion for tech and sports to create a digital personal trainer.
Yeah, this is a cool conversation about innovation, startups, pivoting, and bringing new ideas to life.
Specifically getting his digital personal trainer startup off the ground and how it was refined from a hardware solution into a software solution, and how it tracks your form and performance with just the camera on your phone.
And what's really interesting about this episode, I think, is his journey and how the business is fueled by his passion and drive. And I think anyone working on a startup or thinking up a new idea will draw inspiration from listening to Fransisco.
Lovely. Well, with that, how are you doing, Chris?
I'm doing all right. So we've had a bit of a wholesome weekend, haven't we? We spent some time together in person rather than digitally.
Indeed. Actually, my hand is hurting from painting your walls, so I think you...
Yeah, I roped you into some DIY of painting my hallway.
Paying me in pizza.
Oh yeah, I'm paying you in pizza, yeah, and helping me clean my garage. I think I have just dust still in my lungs from all of that sweeping we had to do.
Yeah. Well, it was a nice change because, like I mentioned, I think we're sat at a desk all day, every day, and it's nice to actually use muscles and lift things and use different parts of your brain. It just sort of resets you a little bit, and
but it was good to spend some time together. You helped me progress massively with the house, which is great. Lots of painting done.
You didn't have to repaint the walls then?
No, I haven't gone back and redone all of your work. Don't worry about that.
Not yet.
Well, that's probably enough from us. I think we've waffled on, and we've got a great conversation coming up. So let's hear from Fransisco.
Lovely.
Hey, Fransisco. I'm the founder of TeamSportz, a sports AI platform for grassroots and amateur sports. I'm a software engineer by heart, and I am a basketball player. So TeamSportz is a bit of a combination of a profession and a hobby, all mixed together into something.
Nice. So for the listeners, you can't see this, but Fransisco is wearing a fabulous Lakers hoodie, so he basketball through and through. I can
True, and the listeners won't see that Kobe Bryant signed the basketball for me.
There you go, avid Kobe Bryant fan as well. So
wow, that's a significant piece of memorabilia now. That
it is, yeah. I know. Funnily enough, I nearly sold it because strapped for cash as startup life goes, and I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah, hang on to that one.
We always like to just get a bit of background on our guests before we get into the meat of it. Talk us through kind of what led you up to this point of developing AI software for grassroots sports.
Sure. So I was born in Angola, and throughout Civil War basketball, seeing my mom newspaper clippings of her winning local trophies, basketball always been sort of a passion for me. And I go there back in time because I think that's really where this originated. Really, I was lucky that I lived in Brazil. I studied my secondary school in Brazil. I'm half Portuguese, half Angolan, and so then I didn't want to pursue my daddy's choice for my profession as a vet, and decided to pursue my career as a software engineer. Moved to Portugal to be with my mom and the rest of the family, where I started as a software engineer. And then continued my career into UK as a software engineer, and later on as sort of a technical manager, technical program manager, managing teams both here in UK and in US. But the only constant throughout my life has been that I always play basketball. I still play here in Hertfordshire, second division team. And so TeamSportz, effectively, it is definitely some of the pain points that I felt as a basketball player throughout my life, as an amateur basketball player that I felt throughout my life, and how can I put my skills to use to solve some of those pain points.
Nice. And when you say software engineer, what tech stack were you kind of using? What was...
Sure. Actually, I started as a Delphi. So let's go back a bit. So I started as a QBasic. So my first piece of software was a QBasic typing software that I put together to help my schoolmates to learn to type with both hands and gain some speed on typing. There was a text, to the side, a random text, and then sort of a simple editor, and it would measure how many keystrokes per second. And then I learned Delphi 5. I don't know if anyone knows what Delphi is today. It was a programming language by Borland, the company. And then I jumped into PHP with advent of the internet around 2000, 2001 with PHP Nuke and other sort of early days management, sort of website management tools, which weren't really a reality then. And I've been mostly a backend developer with a bit of Python in a mix, but mostly a backend developer with sort of PHP, Perl scripts, Python scripts, that sort of stuff. Yeah.
I used Python for the first time the other day, and I've got to say, it's a lovely little language.
It is, isn't it? It is.
I built like a little web scraper, and it was just like an hour of work or 2 hours of work. It was like, what?
I know. Yeah. Most importantly, if you come back a year later, you'll still be able to read that code nicely.
Yeah, well, there we go. I look forward to future me enjoying that scraper. Do you ever miss the kind of coding side and development side? I mean, you might even be doing it now, but in that context.
I did miss. So I think as my career migrated sort of naturally into sort of more sort of a tech admin sort of type of role, I did miss, being able to be hands-on. But I think one thing that I've gained by forcing myself not having access to sort of repos, etc., whilst I was managing teams, was my soft skills and sort of the ability to influence people without writing code. Even though in my head, I might be translating everything sort of, I know exactly what you're going to tell me next sort of thing. But I think that was great for me to gain a lot of those soft skills and sort of people skills, which generally as a developer, in all ways, you have got the opportunity to have. But at TeamSportz, I started on my own for a year and a half. So I was writing code. And I taught myself how to train models and how to get things up and running. And then things became easier as I brought in my CTO. Funnily enough, my CTO is the guy that gave me my first job when I was a young lad in Portugal. So we go back sort of literally a full circle, right? And I used to work for him, and now we work together to build TeamSportz. But no, I still write code. So I like to think it's a 50-50 split, depending how late I stay awake. That might change, but all the backend side of TeamSportz is still, owned and maintained by me. Most of the front end and mobile side is maintained by the rest of the developers.
Yeah. Chris, who was our guest who was a self-described manager coder person? And what term was it? It was the Code in Space episode.
Was it executive coder? That was that Rakesh?
Executive coder, yes, yeah.
Trawling through my memory of 40 plus episodes.
I need to listen to that one. Executive code. I am not an executive coder yet. I think I want to get to that place where I'm sort of writing code by request. I don't even know what executive coder does, but yeah.
I would say you are as someone who's at that executive level, someone who's able to, do all that, but also is still able to get their hands dirty and write code. So that sounds like you to me.
Yeah, I know. If you speak to my lead developers, they probably would rather I don't touch the code and stay with the executive level. But yeah, it's a matter of opinion,
Yeah, that's really cool. And we'll get to TeamSportz as well, because it's good to understand like kind of where you're coming from. And it was funny. I was having a conversation today about those soft skills when it comes to, engineers and their manager, because sometimes they're just not cut out for it. And that's totally fine. But it's definitely something that does not come naturally to a lot of engineers. And you seem to have learned right into that and picked up the skills. So it's sort of all coming together where kind of TeamSportz come from. So we have a lot of listeners who are business owners themselves, and they love to hear that kind of transformation piece. Obviously, basketball has been playing a role in your life. When did the transition happen or start to happen into TeamSportz?
I mean, looking back, I have a diagram on my notepad from 4 years ago. So I think like many amateur players, we were keen on having data. We find ways to track data through many wearables, through Strava, and I guess the realization really came by just stepping back and seeing that we were, as a team, we were attempting to do that. We all keen to sort of understand a little bit of our performance, understand a little bit of what else could we do beyond the practice and the game, whether they went for a run and we tracked that with Strava, whatever it might be. So we were already keen, sort of, there is an appetite for that sort of technology. And then it was just one step closer to say, hold on, why don't we have one? To realize how underserved sort of the sports market was. So I would say, I stumbled into it because we were already having those pain points, and there wasn't sort of, was just a eureka moment, sort of stepping back and thinking, hold on, this could work because it's already working somehow, but it's not brought in together and put in together as a platform, as a solution, etc. And so there, I guess, is this sort of the very beginning of TeamSportz. But what you might not know is that TeamSportz started as a hardware solution, not as a software solution, no AI whatsoever. So I spent most of my savings on developing an ultra wideband wearable that worked indoors. So we could track a player running 100 times better than a GPS because of the sensors, in a court, tracking the ultra wideband tag, let's say, wearable running. And that was interesting. So there was many learnings from there, including how expensive it is to start a business, how expensive it is to commission hardware and reduce the size of a PCB, how much crude, when you go down to the chip level, that you start realizing sort of that sort of abstraction that we benefit as developers with platforms and Django and other sort of frameworks, higher level frameworks. None of that exists, right? You're literally close to the chipsets, and you realize actually you need to build sort of an API before you can build some sort of a logic, before you can build a product. So how far away you are, but also sort of how humble I had to become to ask for help, ask for the teammates. So I had to connect about 8 sensors around the basketball court that was rented for an hour. So I had 5 minutes to put a 3 meters high sensors all around the court, connected to a small computer, and then give the tags to everyone so they could, while they were practicing or playing, I could collect enough data and take it all off before the next team came and ran to the court, right? And the learnings were not just about sort of the effort, that you took to do that, and sort of how much we learn in doing it so, but also that the business model just wouldn't stand, because amateur teams rent a court that belongs to a sports hall or to a school, etc., and so they don't own their venue. So effectively, I had to develop a business model that I was selling TeamSportz or the sensors to a court, which is often the schools, privacy concerns, etc. Even if it's a ultra wideband, there's no cameras, it's just radio waves, and the sensor does absolutely nothing unless there is a sort of a tag running in between. Picking up on those signs of those would be big barriers. Like if I had to go into a local council just so that a school enables some of those sensors in the venue, let alone scaling the rest of the business, which is selling the wearables to the players. So, and that effectively picking up on those signs, sort of like, this is not going to stand, and we pivot to a software solution only using computer vision and machine learning. But yeah, lessons learned.
It's quite an interesting pivot to make as well, from being fully hardware to fully software. Was there a period of overlap where you were using both, or was it?
No, there wasn't. So it felt like, a gut wrench, sort of throwing away a year and a half and about, I think, £67,000 on the hardware development. So, I think the best way to think about it is sort of, I am dreaming. TeamSportz for me is a reality. And I remember, 3 or 4 years ago, I was introduced to someone that I admire, Amanda McKenna. It took me about maybe 3 or 4 months, and we could get a coffee. And in my head, TeamSportz was that thing. It's literally just needed to make it happen. Naivety, I guess, or belief in sort of, on something. And I remember very clearly we met. We work next to the Guardian office, and she said to me after we, introductions, etc. I talked about this amazing solution for amateur teams, and she said, you don't have anything. You don't have anything. You don't have a business. You don't have anything. You just have an idea in your head. And for me, it was sort of like, what just happened here? And then she said, you know what? But I'm not going to leave you alone, and we're going to have one call a month. And we pretty much had one call a month for now 3 years or so, where she effectively helped me really understand sort of what are the next steps. And it's that coaching that often I think I speak to other entrepreneurs that are where I was, and they struggle to get basics of that guidance and sort of understand that actually having an idea is one thing. Execution of that idea, can take all sorts of routes, whether hardware was one, but that, software only is one, but who knows what could be actually the true route or to deliver what I think is what TeamSportz, should be as a vision. And Amanda helped me do that free of charge. So literally just one call where I sort of, this is what I'm thinking. This is my problems. This is my existential crisis. What should I do next? And this is what I'm thinking. And really admire sort of that sort of, she always took in everything and put things black and white in front of me, and sort of without, too much flower around it. And that really sort of helped me think about, actually, let me do this. I might not understand, but let me try to build a business model. Let me try to forecast. Let me try to, and sort of you end up having to do things that effectively at least make you understand to yourself, what exactly is that you're doing and where you are, or that, then what are you dreaming about, right? So it brings, things to the ground, and that was very helpful. And later on, obviously, with further investment and other investors that also spend a lot of time with me, sort of help sort of understand exactly what is the reality, what does it mean to go to market, and what do you need to do, and sort of and those things make a huge difference, and made a huge difference for me. Having the team was key to get that, and having the team buying in at no salary, also doing a side hustle, for a year plus, of course helped. But this is sort of what she meant. I don't have anything because I didn't have a team. I didn't had a business plan that, sort of forecast and demonstrate that I've got a business. There was no traction. There was a rough prototype. There was no confirmation that prototype would work. How do you scale the hardware? How do you replace broken hardware? And so on and so on. So force you thinking about those things. And that really was really helpful. Yeah.
So post pivot then, you're now heading down a software route. Well, talk to us a little bit about what you've got now, and then how you actually managed your way from that pivot to where you are now.
Yeah. So I think the best thing we've done, and I think lack of resources for us was a bless more than a curse. It feels like a curse, but it was a bless, because we were in such a tight corner that we needed to be creative on how we leverage what our players and coach have, which is mainly a lack of resources. And so we wanted to build a solution that actually worked with what people have and the resource they have, than a solution that imposed an additional cost, i.e. need to buy a new wearable, or I need to go to a court where this hardware is enabled, or that sort of stuff. And so we knew that the only resource all players and coaches had were their phones. But we also knew that by training a few models using YOLO 3 and using a little bit of TensorFlow, that there is a limit to how many models you can run on the phone without burning the battery, and you can't really hold it. It gets too hot. So we were really in a tight corner. We had a business model that we were adamant that we needed to make it work, i.e. price is the key entry to barrier to sports technology. Hands down. Anything else? I mean, there are problems with leadership and other things, and people don't really see sports as a human right, which they should. But that aside, we knew that if this wasn't affordable for everyone anywhere, it wouldn't work. So that forced us into a corner where we had to think about, okay, so let's think about, we only run one model on the phone. So today, TeamSportz is one model running on the phone. And we wrote our own algorithm they interpret what the output of their machine learning model is doing, and does the calculations and count your stats, etc. And it runs on your phone as well. No video archiving, no distribution, because also that would break our business model, right? If I had to, record you doing the exercise, stream to the cloud, dealing with network issues, latency, analyze in the cloud, back to the resort. So today, TeamSportz is private, and not many business can say that, because London Sports partner with TeamSportz. Actually, our first paid partnership with London Sports 2 years ago, and they deployed it to 21 satellite clubs. But those were the youth in sort of deprived areas, and the fact that you can open your camera stream, do a physical activity, and at the end of it, you only get some stats, and your coach gets some stats. That is the sort of privacy that we don't see in many business today. Yes, we had requests to use video, and can I see myself doing the exercise? It's like, actually, we're not really in a sports entertainment business. Facebooks and Googles of the world, they can't police video, right? They struggle, and people can record video. They do the most crazy things that exist in the planet, and we didn't want to deal with that. But again, it meant that we need to make technical solutions that fit our mission, and is to enable a solution for everyone anywhere. And there brings the creativity, and that brought in sort of what we have today, which is an AI-enabled business that doesn't break the bank.
So talk to us, for those who are listening and don't know what TeamSportz is. What does the app actually do at this point? Because you previously, you're tracking data for people using the hardware. Now you've gone completely away from that. You're running stuff on a phone, but how does it work? What are we actually seeing here?
Sure. So TeamSportz works in two ways. So TeamSportz is for teams, which means the coach is very much part of that journey. So the coach has an interface that is a web responsive interface where they can manage the team, schedule games, attendance, all the sort of the basic organizational stuff that enables teams to come together. Once the coach has invited the players to TeamSportz platform, the players will download the app, join their teams, see their teammates, understand what is the schedule, games and practices, when they're going to happen, accept, decline, all sort of that good, coming together stuff. Now, the second part of this is that because we've got an AI-enabled app to track sports, so you can do basketball drills, skills exercises on the app to increase your ball handle and ball control, but also do some conditioning exercise. So you can do push-ups, sit-ups, squats, diamond push-ups, and the app will actually track those for you. So no self-reporting, which increases that accountability with your coach. So if the coach says, hey, Chris, your upper body strength, those rebounds are really, really, really terrible in the last game. You got to do some push-ups. You go home, you point the phone to yourself on your app, on your own time in the office. Are we work? I've done push-ups at train stations, so don't blame me. So you will see people doing exercises everywhere very soon. At your own time, at your own pace, you do your exercises. The most important is that you can see your stats. Your teammates on the app can see that you're putting on the work. But most important, your coach can see that. So next time you come to practice again, coach knows you've got some more minutes there because you're definitely putting on the time, and I want to see if that worked with your rebounding on a game. So that is the second part of TeamSportz. And the third part of TeamSportz is sort of what happened during the game. How do we understand? How can we learn from what happened during the game? And so our coaches have been recording their games using their phones, handheld, on a tripod. We don't really care how they record the games. They upload the game into the platform, and they can do some tagging and labeling in on that video, which generates stats, games, assists, pass, dunks, crosses, whichever sport you're using, generates stats, which again come into the app for you as a player, and you guys can see after the game, so what really happened. And then we're going to go beyond that. We're going to generate highlights and insights, so you can actually see 20-second snippets of the dunk of the game, or the pass of the game, or the goal of the game, or whatever it might be, right? So create the loop and feedback between coaches and players to have that meaningful conversation around training and development, around gaming and development, as well as organization. So that's TeamSportz.
So on tracking, the view of a game, you're able to see however many players there might be on a pitch, whether it's 22 people or more or less depending on what game it is?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So there's a couple of things here to address. So one is that we do not discriminate on how you're going to record your game. So you could not see the whole pitch, but have someone pointing to where the action is and point to where the players and the ball are on the pitch. The most important is that our coach can make something out of that video, not me, not sort of how the platform is dictating. They might want to just create 3 highlights of their game, nothing else. Or they might want to actually see the whole game and say, you know what, I'm going to just follow Samuel to see what Samuel is doing and let me do some analysis on a specific player, or could be the whole game or everyone else. So do as much as little as you want. And the reason why we want this to be the way it is because, remember, I said earlier, we don't want to have a custom hardware camera solution that does something magical and see the whole pitch, etc., etc. Because what we can see of that in the market is other companies trying to do something like that. And I came from a hardware business, right? I know how much they have invested in their business model and in developing their hardware and develop their business. And that is the reason why they cannot compete with us. Because even when they try to sell their cameras to amateur teams, and we've got coaches coming to us and say, we've got a view camera, and they can't afford a second camera because they have got the under 14, the under 16, the under 18, and then the men's one team. They bought one camera because sort of entry point cheap, but actually they've got multiple teams playing with one camera only. That doesn't work. They can't record all the games. And so suddenly they're stuck into a business model which is not designed for them. And we said, hold on, everyone has a phone. Just put it on a tripod and record your game and make do with what you want with that video, whether you sort of moving around, whether you are, have got a viewpoint and you can elevate your phone and see the majority of the court. For a 5-a-side football, a netball, or a basketball court, any phone can see the whole court with a ultra wide zoom, which most phones nowadays have.
So the AI in this at the moment, then, is that coming into being able to track players and keep track of them as they move around the pitch?
At some point, definitely will. At the moment, no. So the AI is only using on a phone for you to train and exercise.
Right. Okay. So I noticed on your site as well, it talks about body form. Is that integrated yet, or is that something that's coming up then?
It's coming up. So we're very, very, very close. So we already have an algorithm that understands tolerances on your form. And we're very close to be able to give you a form score at every rep. Remember, the training and the analysis happening on your phone, not on a cloud. So if you're doing a squat and you're doing it wrongly, or you're tilting forward or slouching as you go down, you'll be able to see visually, or having your audio cues for you to pull your body back. So not after exercise, your form was 60%. It's like, okay, but when it was at the beginning, was at the end, was in the middle. So we will give you a feedback at every rep on where you are and if your form is not quite right. I think it's worth adding, Chris, here. Some of those things are pretty cool, and so much we can do with our existing technology already. We know how many times you exercise. You know your exercise pattern. You know how much you can or cannot do. And we could write, an algorithm that sort of drives your performance up. But we, TeamSportz, we refrain from doing that because we don't want to be anyone's coach. And TeamSportz can never understand the human context on why your performance is up or why your performance is down. So having an algorithm that sort of tries to push your performance up are the mistakes that we see in the fitness apps, etc., where sort of good is always, more. And we don't think that's the case. That is an element of load management. And there is no one better than your coach. He knows you got injured in the last game. He's not going to expect you to do, go for a 2 miles run, whatever, next week, even though this was the goal to do. He's okay. He's like, doesn't matter. Your coach and your teammates know you got injured last game. TeamSportz has no idea of that human context and element. And so what we want to be is we're placed better by enabling a technology that adds more meaning to that conversation and that existing connection, and enables coaches to influence your performance, understand your performance, and vice versa. And even the form is something that we applying tolerance, etc. But we already seen kids need much higher tolerances. Is this the wrong form? Is it the right form? They're not going to get injured and doing a push-up or two, and they're never going to be able to do 100. So there is always a degree that I don't think is a place for team sports. In fact, I get push I've got all sorts of sports apps, as you can imagine, and I get push notifications of things like, dude, why are you wasting carbon in a planet like this? Don't push notifications like this, because you just don't understand. I'm not even interested in your app, and no many notifications for me to do more and be more active will ever push me. However, if my coach said so, oh yeah, there's no doubt I will do it.
So are you integrating with like existing wearables and things then to actually get like heart rate data and other things like that?
I like to say we do have that in our pipeline. Our first integration with Strava, we're just nearly completing our integration with Strava. We think that is a clear benefit for us as a product there with Strava, where you gain distance and pace into your stats for you and your teammates to see, and your coach, because some players and some coaches prefer the players to go for a run and get their cardio up than sort of do push-ups or sit-ups or squats. And so there is a very clear benefit for us as a product to integrate with Strava and get distance in place. We are considering integrating beyond that with Aura, etc. Aura does an amazing job on predicting, period and female athletes, etc. There's an area that I'm very curious about, and we have got the capacity to pull that data into our platform. But I'm also mindful that, I don't want to turn TeamSportz platform into sort of a data heavy that data analysts will love it. So we're not building TeamSportz for data analysts. We're building for everyone anywhere. And we've got coaches that come, but I've got this company that they can give me 30 or 100 data points on this hardware solution. I said, that's fantastic. But do you need the 100 points, or you need 2 data points? And do you want the quantity? Because we collect about maybe closer to 500,000 data points if you do 1 minute of exercise in the app whilst you're doing some push-ups and squats. Now, there is plenty of data to go around and do all sorts of analysis and come up with all sorts of creative ways to show. But how much really can your brain retain when you are a coach of one team is 30 players? So if you are a coach of 5 teams, how many data points do you really need on all those players in order to make the decisions that will sort of propel and continue developing those players sort of as an athletes and having fun as well, etc. So it becomes sort of something kind of data rich, data heavy, and we're not building something like that. We're building something to enable grassroots to have access to things that only professionals have, but without thinking that we can take these to shove a second out of a 43-year-old such as myself. I don't want to shove a second on any sprint that I do on courts. Like, maybe my coach would like me to, but maybe I would like to, but no, that's not going to happen for me.
So you mentioned about the AI before. I mean, how are you? Obviously, the form stuff isn't in there just yet, but it's coming. But for the videos that you've got, how are you turning those videos into a set of data points? Like, and which ones did you think were useful, and which ones have actually turned out to be useful?
That's a good question. So we started with what we could track. We started with reps and sessions and duration of the exercises, and then we added speed, sort of in terms of overall duration of the session, the number of reps.
And these are just coming from a video. Then you can determine the number of reps and the speed, etc., from the video.
Yeah. So, and when you say video, it's not really video; it's just your camera. We don't record a video, right? So there is no video of you doing anything. So we literally open the camera view. You enable your camera and you're about to take a picture, but without pressing the button to take a picture. So it's so we use the camera view live, analyzing on your phone, and then we close the camera view when you finish your exercise, and you get some stats out of it, and your coach gets some stats.
That's the same for the filming of the game as well. Well, not filming, but the watching of the game.
No, that's a different aspect. So the watching the game is definitely someone recording a video and uploading it to the platform and doing some analysis. But when it comes to training and AI side and the stats that we're pulling through the AI on an individual training, it is done through the camera technology and our algorithm.
So the camera's just watching you then, and you're able to take the data points from the camera from the camera.
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
Where is your baseline of, for example, a squat? Take a squat for instance. You're then giving insights and whatever into whether your form is correct, whether you're slouching, as you mentioned. Where are you getting that data from to know that is classed as a slouch? Is that completely bespoke that you've written, or are there repositories out there that that want a certain vector point structure that then it will tell you whether that's out of form?
Yeah, we're only recording audio, right? So it's a shame I can't do a demo. So when we started, pivoting into machine learning, there were a few questions, and actually how I built TeamSportz that I sort of, in a way, refused to answer. One of the questions was, am I a B2B or a B2C business? So we are an API-enabled business, and so we can do both. And also, we are not a basketball app. And we are a sport, so we want to enable sports teams to develop. So for that, we knew that we couldn't hard code detecting ball control drill to be specific to basketball. Neither train a model for it, because we know there is a limitation on resources on a model. So we literally developed an exercise editor, which I'm happy to demo, where you can do the perfect squat, or you think is a perfect squat because you're a coach and you're a trainer, you're a performance trainer, and you can do a perfect squat, or demonstrate through a video on YouTube of someone doing a perfect squat. And we can add that video into our platform, and we can literally, with a few clicks, we can decide what we want to track and apply tolerance to every part of the body, and then save and then publish. No extra training needed, no anything. So we can actually track virtually exercises that we might not even know of. So how does a wheelchair hockey player, which exercises they do? I don't know, but they coach know what they need to do to stay active and to train. They can load the video of that and say, okay, I can track this part of body doing this and that, and then I track doing this and here, and apply certain tolerances because they either are kids or they are, more mature players or whatever it might be. So their human context, TeamSportz doesn't have it, but we created the tools to enable you to save and publish, and your wheelchair hockey player will do an exercise with a content that is relatable, that tracks them doing what they think, what they used to do, without self-reporting anything. So,
but for more common exercises, like we've used squats as a theme. If some coaches are able to, multiple coaches are going to be uploading, this is what I think is a good squat. Are you able to merge those models together, or do you not go in that direction?
No. So what we want to get to is a place where, so this exercise editor become friendly enough that a coach might think, okay, my perfect squat is with a tolerance of 5. And then you might say, my perfect squat is with a tolerance of 20. Tolerances, I mean, within certain angles or positions of your body, you will have certain tolerances, right? And you'll be able to do that for your players because that's meaningful to your players and they can do it. And that for you is ideal. And the other coach will do something else. But remember that TeamSportz is not really involved in that decision, right? We're not deciding what a good squat is. So we provided the tools that enable you to say, actually, my players are 13 years old. They're neither going to do 20 squats at a time, and then I'm not sure they're ever going to be in the right form. So let me allow certain tolerances so they can still do the squats and get tracked. So I know they are active in doing the push-ups or squats and the same theme. And someone else might think, actually, this is not for us. Our team is a semi-pro and they should know how to do a squats. And if they know within 5% tolerances, they off the mark, and the app won't even count your squats.
And does the position of the camera make a difference when you're trying to view the forms?
At the moment, it does make a difference. Because we sort of assume that you're going to fix your your phone sort of down below, sort of propped against the water bottle or something, and you sort of on that angle to the camera. But we are working on an algorithm that you could potentially lift your phone whilst you're doing your push-ups, and I can go around you with the phone, and it will count how many push-ups you're doing. So we started with being able to track a few exercises. Now we can track a lot more exercises, but also we can track a combination of sequence. So we getting closer to a place where I can put my phone. I haven't decided what I want to do. I'm not sure I want to do push-ups, and I'm sure I'm going to do squats. I'm just going to put my phone, do a warm-up, and then you start doing something. We get into a place where the algorithm will be able to use all those exercise configurations and be able to run through all of them and be able to figure out, oh, yes, I can see you doing some push-ups. Let me count that. And then, oh, you're not doing anything else. And then, oh, you start doing some squats. Let me count that. So we're now in a place where we can do a multi-sequence sort of exercise or sequences in a sequence of movements. So thinking about this generic sort of exercise of unknown nature sort of thing. But we are heading to a place where you'll be able to pick up your phone and go around someone doing the exercise, which will be fantastic because, sometimes you are in a gym and you want to track that. You could potentially prop your phone. And remember, although you're in a gym, there might be other people there. There's no privacy consent, right? There's no video of anyone.
Sounds really, really impressive. Like, I think this is an incredible tool. You've mentioned grassroots and your passions for it for a few times now, and obviously there's you mentioned as well that the pros have access to this kind of technology. Where does your passion and where does your drive for grassroots sports stem from? Is that more of a business decision, or is that more of a passion? Well, obviously there needs to be a merging of the two, but where does your passion lie with grassroots?
I think the passion lies beyond sort of grassroots sports. I think the passion really is, I wish sports was a human right, because sports did wonders for my life, having born during a bloody civil war. And I think for whatever reason, sports still struggle, to be perceived as such a impactful activity with an actual net positive to life outcomes and to the economy as a whole.
I'm a firm believer that kind of making something accessible will drive there's a lot of success that comes from that. So I come from a website sort of background and world, and when you make a website accessible to as many people as possible, it makes for a better overall experience. And I think that going for that grassroots, basically it's striving to force you to build a product that is accessible to many, many different people. And, we talk about grassroots sports. They're not going to have massive budgets. They're not going to have huge, in some instances, hugely committed coaches and people that run those teams or whatever, because they're often sharing the responsibility between certain coaches and stuff like that. So those limitations, I think, being placed on you are personally, I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong, like I think they're driving you to build a better product.
Oh, definitely, yeah. They drive us to be more creative. Sort of, sometimes it's in the smallest details. So, Google Maps integration. Obviously, every time we need to ping the API, they will sort of charge us. Let's say, on a volume base, right? So, but now let's think about it. So, a venue here, let's say in Hemel Hempstead, a local school, is rented by multiple teams. The address doesn't change. If one of the teams comes into TeamSportz and say, this is my address, and we get all the geo coordinates from the Google API, we don't need to do it again, because when the netball team that comes into TeamSportz uses the same venue, we already have the geo coordinates. And so it's sort of thinking about those things cleverly enough within your business model and adjust the technology so that you're not breaking the bank, because it is so easy to make an integration with a system that you sort of, this is fantastic, this is amazing. And before you know it, now, there is no margin here. Now a very amount, we're charging at £3.99 per player per month on a monthly subscription, and £2.90 per month on a year subscription. That's like cheaper than a coffee. There is very little margin there. So we need to be super clever about that. And by doing so, we become very creative. we sort of stayed true to our vision, enabled for everyone, I guess, and anywhere. Yeah.
I feel like it would be amiss if we just glossed over what you said about growing up in the midst of a war. Because it feels like we've just passed that one by. Which war was this, and how did you end up making it to the UK?
Good question. So I was born in Angola. So Angola was a former Portuguese colony. In 1975, sort of forced its way through independence from the Portuguese, like many of other 5 countries in Angola did the same, and Brazil did the same, and etc. And as you know, the independence of India was less bloody than the independence in Angola. But the only difference is that Angolans start fighting for power, and Angola is one of the richest countries in the southern hemisphere in Africa, with vast resource of oil, and you can find diamonds with your bare hands. If you ever watched the DiCaprio sort of the Blood Diamond movie, sort of, you can find diamonds with your bare hands. So that level of resource brings a degree of greed from all nations of the world that fuel that civil war for 40 plus years. And so I was born on school being bombed, and houses being flattened, and, bodies everywhere, as sadly as it is. That was my reality until I was 17.
So I presume there wasn't much of an opportunity to get involved with sports in the midst of a civil war. And
this is actually where it sort of, I think, is interesting. So you need very little to sort of practice sports. So, I didn't have a nice basketball hoop like I have got here in the garden. I had a wheel of a bike nailed to a wooden board, and does the job. And didn't really matter if the ball was a little flat, because there wasn't a store to buy another ball or anything like that. So it's interesting. And I think that sort of constraint and creativity actually stems a lot from how I grew up. So I didn't have a store to go and buy a toy. We used to get empty cans of oil or anything and cut it up and build our own cars and our own toys. We did ourselves, not sort of an adult did for us, because in a mix of a war, you can imagine my dad with 3 kids had a lot more to deal with than I had, as a young kid, right? So in that context, you'd not be surprised that your parents are not that sort of helping you and holding your hand not to cut your fingers. They just know, you won't cut your finger because it doesn't grow back, and that sort of tough love type of thing, right?
It's potentially the least of the worries as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cutting a finger in the middle of war is definitely the least of the worries. But I think this is actually where sports and the playfulness and sort of, finding joy in the midst of the biggest disasters, you just can do it. And I see for my kids over here, I feel a bit sorry. They one less like, and my teenage daughter, thinks the world is finishing, and I think my generation, having been brought up, an analog in deprivation, dealing with sort of this digital age of the world feels almost a breeze, right? So, and they sort of grew up digital, and I think one less like, is a problem. And while I had to, get an empty can to build a car, they get an order from Amazon delivered. So, different world, different problems, can't compare suffering, but
it's quite a different perspective. But does that, for someone who started their own company, especially going that hardware route, did that give you a different perspective on like how you actually spent the money? Because presumably there wasn't much, although there's, it's a wealthy country, like you say, with the diamonds, presumably there wasn't much money around in the midst of a civil war.
It's true. So I think my investors know that I am very conservative with money that I've raised, and I can make sort of, I guess, to stick to the theme, diamonds out of, of nothing. Both because I've got the technical skills and the drive, but I think also because I don't think, sometimes it's not about how much money you spend. Sometimes it is, but often actually it's not how much money you spend. It's sort of, there are other ways to get to what you want. So I'm very conservative with money, but I've got a team with now 8 people, 4 of us are full-time. And so, obviously there is some money spent. Spending wisely also means that, whether it's for me and my background I think is actually the case from any entrepreneur, is that learning that skill and thinking about how can you make the most out of your money do I need a senior or do I need a junior? And can I go through 4 juniors and find that rising superstar, and that will sort of actually be better than at this stage where everything is sort of malleable, things are changing, instead of having a senior sort of fixed views on how software should be built, etc. So I think it does. Maybe it is me being conservative with money, but I think I actually don't have huge amount. I mean, the investment has been good, but it is not. It's not going to make TeamSportz sort of success, that investment per se. It's really sort of the execution side of it, and sometimes I think it's less about how much money you spend in order to achieve that execution. In some cases, I think that's the case. So I'm very conservative with money, and I can make it last for as long as possible. But I think that is testament